back in the sewing room today, and I'm going to be showing you how to make a basket weave quilt block. And I have 4 of them arranged behind me. So let's zoom in and we'll take a close look at it. So if you look at one of the blocks, it's constructed kind of like I constructed the log cabin quilt block in my prior video. So what it is 4 separate blocks. And if you look, here's one here, and it's very much like the foundation of the log cabin quilt block. And you just use your different colors to arrange them into this basket weave, which I think is really cool to play with. And you can make an entire quilt out of it. You can make a table runner. So let's get started and I'll show you how it's made. This block turns out to be an 8-inch block, finished. That means when we finish sewing it together, it's 8.5. And when it's sewn into your quilt, it'll finish at 8 inches. And I'm using 2.5-inch strips. And you'll need 1 color for your background. And then you'll need 4 separate colors for your weaves. And depending on how many you want to make, that will determine how much fabric you need. But for just this one block to demonstrate, this is how much you'll need. You'll need, for the background, a 10 to 12 inch long strip. And then for your colors of the weave, you would need 4 7-inch strips. And again, they're all 2.5 inches wide. The first thing I did was I started actually using a layer cake. And you can use any fabric cuts that you want, but I just happen to have this. And a layer cake is a 10-inch square pre-cut fabric. So what I did is I cut it into 2.5-inch strips. And then from the 2.5-inch strips, I took one of the strips and I cut it into 2.5-inch squares of each of the colors. And I have my background fabric today, which I just used a width of fabric cut. And I'm using a whole strip of 2.5 inches. I did not subcut that. Now what I'll do is take my background strip and I'll take 1 2.5-inch square from each of my colors and I will place them face down, right sides together on my background strip like so. And I will take it to the machine and I will sew a 1/4 inch seam right down here to attach each of these squares to my background fabric. I have my 1/4 inch quilting foot, starting with my first square. When I get to the end of this one, I'll just place my next color down. Line it up and just keep going. You don't have to stop the sewing at all. Again, this is for 1 quilt block. Now if I were making a lot of these blocks for a quilt, I like to do about 4 blocks at a time. But just to demonstrate for you, I'm just going to do 1 block today. And no need to tie off, just cut your thread off. And I'll take it to the cutting area and I'm going to cut each one of these apart. I'll use my cutting ruler to line up with the edge of my colored block. Cut them apart. And again, I like to use a smallish cutting ruler when I'm cutting small little pieces like this. And then I'll finish trimming off these edges here, and then I'll take it to the iron. Now I'll press toward the dark fabric, so I'll go ahead and set the seam, open it up, and pressing toward the dark is just the direction your iron is going. I'll do that with each of the blocks. I'll use the block that I previously made as my guide because I want my new block to be in the same exact color order. And the easiest way I've determined to put this block together is to start with these corner units and just make sure your background piece is in the outer edge. So the first one would be on the left with the color to the right. And then I'll leave a little space and I'll put, again, the background on the outer. Now it's going down, so you're going in a clockwise position. The next one is my green, my background in the outer corner. Now I'm going to the left. My final one, background in the corner. Now it's going up, so you can see it just goes clockwise, just like this. Now I'm going to construct each of these 4 units, and I'll start with my pink. Now since I have pink up here, I'll need to have pink down here. You can see how the weave works. So I will just put one of my strips here. And I'm keeping them in strips because if I were making these blocks for a quilt, I would have a whole bunch of these units made and I would make them all at the same time. So I'll put my pink here. First I'll just arrange them all so I don't get confused. Then I'll put my gold. That's going to attach to this unit, and you can see my gold is across from it. Then I'll use my green strip, and that's going to attach to this unit. And then my last one will be my blue strip, and that's going to attach to this unit. And you can see it goes across from here. So you can see the pattern emerging. So have your pins handy. And what I like to do is pin my pieced units onto my strips. So I'll kind of break it up into the 4 corners here, 4 quadrants. So I'll place I want these 2 seams sewn. So I'll open up my strip, flip my pieced unit over, and I always like to pin on my background fabric. And I'll put a pin right where I want to begin sewing. Set that aside. Open up my strip. I want these 2 seams sewn. Flip my pieced unit over. And actually I'm going to start down here. Sorry about that. Flip it over. And I want to start sewing on my background fabric. Put a pin in there. I want these 2 seams sewn. Flip it over. Start sewing on my background fabric. And then my last one. These 2 seams to sew, so I'll flip this over. And again, pin on my background fabric where I want to begin sewing, and I'll take those to the machine and sew them all together with a 1/4 inch seam. I like to have my units all stacked next to my machine in the way that I want to sew them, so I can just grab them. And I don't have to have the top lined up exactly because I'm going to trim that off after And again, just a 1/4 inch seam. And like I did before, I will cut the units away from the strip. So that's what one of your units looks like. And I will continue trimming these and then meet you at the iron. And I like to start pressing with my long side on top, set the seam, and press toward my 4.5 inch strip. Now I'll again use my original block as a guide, arrange my units. So I have my outer edge and my pink, my outer edge and my yellow, outer edge in green, outer edge and blue. And just do a double check that they're all in the right order. That looks good. And now I'll pin these two together. Put a pin where I want to sew my seam. And then I want to pin these two together because I want these seams to attach. And take these to the machine, and again, a 1/4 inch seam right down here and right down here. I'll snip these apart, open them up, and take them to the iron, and I'll press again toward my long seam. I'll set the seam and press toward my 4.5 inch strip. Repeat with my other. So again, I just double check to make sure I'm going all in the right direction. Black to gold, and I've got my black to green. And the last step is to sew these two pieces together, and that'll complete the block. And I just wanted to show you, because I consistently pressed toward my 4.5 inch strip, the seams are going in opposite directions, so they'll nestle right up to each other and be easy to match up those seams. And I'll just put a pin in there. And I will take it to the machine and do my final seam, 1/4 inch. My last seam. And really the important thing here is to match up this, and I do have my pin. And as I approach, I do like to look, make sure they're still nestled up. That looks good. Cross my fingers that they that the seam matches up. So let's give it a look and see. And that looks really nice. Here's the completed block. I just love the way this block looks. And it does take a little thinking when you're putting it together in the beginning, but once you get on a roll, it's a pretty quick block to make, especially if you use longer strips. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.